So in very quick and pretty impressive fashion, Naoya Inoue completely destroys Yoan Boyeaux in the third round, is where the ref calls a halt to it off of body shots. Um, just quick, easy work for Naoya Inoue, basically. He dropped Boyeaux very, very hard in the first round with a big left hook upstairs. Kind of proceeded to kind of probe about with body shots, jabs to the body. Pretty high guard from Inoue in this fight too. But pretty much throwing jabs and then shooting hooks behind the jab afterwards. Boyeaux, for his effort, landed a couple of good right hands to the body, like to the solar plexus area. But other than that, there really wasn't very much offense coming from him. He was largely overwhelmed by the hand speed and just the superior timing, the superior power of Inoue in the end. In the third round, it wound up coming from body shots. It was the jabs largely to the body and then the left hooks to the body after the fact. He went after that kind of lean, long frame of Boyeau's and just bludgeoned him. Just kind of tried to chop the tree down right in the midsection, basically. And that's pretty much what he was able to do. Landed some good right hands to the body as well, and put Boyeaux down three times in the third round in order for the ref to call a halt to it, because Boyeaux really wasn't making any real headway of making the fight competitive at that point. Probably could have continued on, but it probably was just a matter of time before Inoue was going to put him down for the complete 10 count anyway. So good win for Inoue. Solid victory in what was really a bit of a showcase. Definitely a showcase as much as any fight that he's really had recently. Really the way that Inoue's contract is structured is that he has to fight either a world champion, failing that, his number one contender for whatever title he may be holding at a given time, failing that, a former world champion, and then failing that, some sort of voluntary. Boyeaux falls into that very latter category of some sort of voluntary. And matter of fact, so did his last opponent, Antonio Nieves. Before that, when he caught for Ricardo Rodriguez, that was a mandatory. Koi Kono was a former champion and a voluntary. Karunji Rupian David Carmona were both mandatories, or would have been both mandatories had they pressed for them. Walter Perenas was a mandatory, and of course Omar Narvaez was the champion at the time. So, in spite of the fact that he wasn't able to get Joan Acosta in the ring, who has apparently turned down 3 offers with him, as far as I was aware, it was only 2, but I've actually heard that there was a third one made at some point between about a year ago and now, when Inoue and Ancaz could have fought. Although Ancaz, just recently signed to Top Rank, so it's not entirely surprising as to why he would have turned down a recent offer from Inoue, because the money that he's going to be getting at Top Rank is definitely going to be more than he was just making under MP Promotions, Manny Pacquiao's promotional outfit. So, I'm sure Ancaz will bring a little bit more money to the table, and who knows, maybe they'll be able to make a fight between him and Inoue in the future. Although, considering the way that Top Rank has steered Rex Cho's career, who Rex Cho was actually either the number 1 or number 2 contender pretty much for the last 2.5 years straight, that might not be as likely as I'm kind of hoping that it would be, because it seems like they've gone to great lengths to make sure that Rex Cho versus Naoya Inoue doesn't happen, because Rex Cho is bringing enough ratings in the Hong Kong local area, especially, as well as the greater kind of Chinese market in general, the greater Chinese mainland market, in order to justify his not taking as risky fights as Inoue would be. And then, of course, Jamie Conlon, who incidentally was also the other guy that was either number 1 or number 2 for the last about 2 years straight, where Conlon, his team refused to fight Inoue and eventually decided to try to get on Ancaz in the UK to see if they could maybe pick up a belt, kind of steal one away, so to speak. But that was not going to be happening, as Ancaz pretty brutally and savagely beat Conlon down and stopped him. But now Inoue, the reason why I bring all that up is because Inoue has basically stated that he's going to be moving up to bantamweight really soon. So it's really unfortunate because of the fact that the super flyweight division over this past year has really heated up in a major way. Even with the possibility of Roman Gonzalez being almost done, Whether it's he's on the downside, whether it's he's shot, or whether it's he may be retiring after one or two more fights. You have the emergence of Cesar Rungvisai, the re-emergence of Juan Francisco Estrada, the emergence of Carlos Cuadras, Rashid Warren moving down into the weight class. Guys like that, existing and being I think both legitimate and very enticing challenges for somebody like Inoue. But Inoue has also stated, as long as about a year and a few months ago, that he was probably going to be moving up to 118 reasonably soon as well. I mean, he has been at the 115-pound limit now for little over 3 years since he moved up into it and fought Narvaez. He's a guy that, he's getting to that age where fighters generally move up a weight class or two. He's 24 years old. If you look at the career of just about any fighter, even in just recent history, if you look at like Mikey Garcia, Adrian Broner, and you look at what Vasyl Lomachenko is about to start kind of doing as well, who he actually recently just moved up. Once fighters usually get into their mid-20s, they start to really get their man strength under them, and they start, they usually move up a division or two in order to kind of level everything out. So it's like they're both getting their natural strength that they would have had just as a regular human being, as well as the fact that they're training at such a high frequency. They'll tend to put on a little bit of extra muscle mass as well. I think basically that's where Inoue's at this point. So given the fact that his contract is structured the way that I kind of stated earlier, I am hoping that at bantamweight he'll be able to fight one of the three champions. I mean, you have Luis Neri with the WBC, you have Zolani Tete with the WBO, and Ryan Burnett holds both the WBA and the IBF. Neri and Tete are extremely enticing fights. Every bit as enticing to me as the likes of Cesar Rungvisai, Juan Estrada, Jeroen Acas, etc. I didn't even mention Cal Yafai because Yafai has turned down so many offers, not just from Inoue, but even from Roman Chocolatito Gonzalez, incidentally, that the guy is almost making himself irrelevant by just not making the damn fights. It's really unfortunate. He needs to get his shit together. But getting back to Inoue, Neri and Tete are both knockout punchers, knockout artists, and guys that have a pretty good amount of skill as well. With Tete, I think it's a little bit easier to see with regards to the fact that he has pitched a couple of shutouts over some pretty high-level opponents. With Neri, it might be a little bit harder to see because he's a little rougher around the edges, but he's just a savage, man. He's like I mentioned it recently. He reminds me of like a mini James Kirkland or like a mini Edwin Valero, almost like blending the styles. The fact that he can box a bit, but he's going out there to really just hurt you. He's really going out there to do damage to you. And a style that's really not too dissimilar from Sisakets, really. Those two fights are very enticing. Burnett maybe a little bit less so, but the thing about Burnett is he brings more money to the table. But at the same time, the fact that he brings more money to the table may make it so that Burnett's team thinks that fighting somebody like Inoue may be premature for him right now, because Burnett can fight some of his domestic UK rivals. He could fight Paul Butler, Stuart Hall, etc., and make some money in the meantime before he goes on to potentially fight somebody like a Naoya Inoue. So that fight may or may not happen depending on what Burnett's team do, because Burnett is he's worth enough, I think, to the UK TV audience that he may try to big time Inoue in a way that Tete and Neri, I'm not necessarily so sure would. Tete recently actually said that he'd like to fight Inoue, so hopefully that could be made good on. I know he has a mandatory probably due pretty soon over Omar Narvaez. Funny enough, the guy that Inoue defeated to get his WBO belt is actually Tete's mandatory now. He recently just had a very, very good win over Nikolai Potapov, who incidentally was the guy that gave Antonio Nieves his only loss, Nieves being the last guy that Inoue fought back on HBO's airwaves on the Superfly card. But, failing Neri, Burnett, or Tete, the most likely opponents would probably be the top-rated guys of the sanctioning bodies. And, just looking at the ratings currently, I do see that you have the likes of Shinsuke Yamanaka, of course, is up there with the WBC, but, basically he's kind of a non-starter most likely because of the fact that he does have a pending rematch with Luis Neri, and kind of depending what goes on with that, if Yamanaka is able to force that rematch, or who knows, maybe he'll step aside and allow Inoue to take the fight first, and then if Inoue manages to win, maybe we'll get Inoue Yamanaka, better late than never type of situation. Otherwise, there's Yoan Parejo. Interestingly enough, Juan Carlos Payano's still pretty highly rated in the WBA. You got Liberorio Solis there, the guy that gave Jamie McDonnell all kinds of hell, and really deserved to win that fight. He's almost like the uncrowned WBA champion. I wouldn't mind seeing Inoue versus Solis. That'd be a fair kind of secondary type of fight. You have an undefeated fighter, Emmanuel Rodriguez, fighter from Puerto Rico, 17-0 with 12 knockouts. I've only seen a little bit of him. He's looked reasonably impressive from what I've seen, but I mean he's basically still in that kind of contender, not yet proven champion stage, as it is. But I mean beyond that, anything other than the guys that I kind of mentioned would be really unfortunate, and it'd be definitely kind of that kind of filler type of opponent like we've seen with his last two, which is unfortunate. So I'm really hoping that we get to see Inoue against one of the top fighters that I mentioned, Burnett, Tete, or Neri. Kind of in reverse order. I'd most prefer to see him against Neri, followed by Tete, followed by Burnett, and then failing them, got somebody of the likes of Rodriguez, Yamanaka, Payano, Solis. I think would be pretty fair secondary choices for his next fight. But hopefully his next fight is back in the U.S., back on HBO. I can very well see, like I've said before, him potentially in the near future now having his big money fights in the United States, where like international audiences are able to see it. When he fights somebody like a Neri or a Tete, and then possibly fighting maybe some of these other guys like a Solis in Japan, more so because they're a little bit lesser known, lesser names, whereby now Inoue would be really bringing more of the TV money to the atmosphere. But that all remains to be seen. But I'm hoping for the best. Unfortunately, even though he started off his 115-pound run with a bang, Inoue hasn't necessarily continued it with the same amount of kind of ferocity and velocity, like upward trending velocity that he kind of started his 115-pound campaign out with. He basically was in a position where he had to fight mandatory after mandatory, and then otherwise got ducked by his own mandatories in Rex Cho and Jamie Conlon, and then finally by IBF champion Jeroen Acas and WBA champion Kalia Fai. So I can also see where him and his team's perspective is with regard to being tired of waiting at 115 pounds, especially if he's starting to have a little bit of trouble making the weight, or if it's just becoming uncomfortable for him to make the weight, along with the fact that he's not making the most of his career, the most of his prime time of his life and his career at a weight class, where he could potentially move up to 118 and really start building a legacy at that point. So let's see what happens. Let's see where he goes from here. Very solid, destructive win, not unlike what he's done to some of his recent mandatories, like Parenas and Carmona. Or like Parena, I mentioned Carmona. Carmona was actually the one guy that took him the 12-round distance, but Parenas and Harupin, let's say, or Kono. But good win for Inoue, and that's going to be all for this one. So I'll catch you guys in the next one. Peace.